So, hello, my name is Kerryn Harper-Cuss, and welcome to our conversation today with the topic Design with Purpose, Legacy Without Ego. I'm really delighted to bring to you a stellar panel of some amazing inspirational faces that I'm sure you already recognise, but I will introduce them. And I'm really excited to hear their thoughts on the subject matter. So first, of course, Sean Sutcliffe. Sean co-founded Benchmark in 1984. Which, as well as epitomising craftsmanship, is one of Britain's most technically advanced furniture workshops. I know that he's a keen proponent of sustainable timber sourcing and also the regeneration of British furniture manufacture, which is very close to my heart too. Jay Blade is, of course, immediately recognisable as presenter of not one but 4 TV shows on the BBC, including The Repair Shop. And he runs a successful furniture restoration business. He's also co-founder of award-winning social enterprises Out of the Dark and Street Dreams, working with disengaged and disadvantaged young people. Katie Treggiden is a highly respected writer and a keynote speaker, known for championing circular approach to design. Her 5th book has just been published and is called Wasted: When Trash Becomes Treasure. I can assure you it's a deeply engaging and thought-provoking read. So we've got quite a lot to cover topic-wise, so I just thought we'd dive straight in. And I'd really like to ask each of you what you think the statement design with purpose means. And I wonder if I could start with you, Jay.
Oh, you put me on the spot. Okay, cool. All right, first up, design with purpose for me is basically what I do. I try to design stuff and influence people I'm never going to meet. And basically what that means is you leave a legacy of anything that you produce has to have some form of sustainability in there to, when people look at it in the future, they'll be like, wow, that's what that was designed. So designing with purpose is looking at the future and the sustainability of people that will be using it or redesigning it. And that's what I tend to do with what I do.
That sounds fantastic. Is there a particular project that you can think of that sort of epitomizes that?
Almost everything I do. I like to use a lot of waste. So most of the furniture that I have is all stuff someone was going to throw away, or I obtain it because I quite like British design. So I like to keep those really historical design gems and then redesign them with my like little bit of quirkiness. And normally if I put like one leg or a button, what that does is it allows the actual chair or sofa or whatever I've redesigned, it allows it to just shine. So it's a nod or a salute to the person that did it before me, and that's what me doing something with a purpose is all about.
I love that sense of continuity as well. Sean, what are your thoughts, Sean, on that design with purpose?
I think what you see, Jay's got this he's got a great advantage because your starting point is other people's waste or rejects. Where you start is what most people would consider to be end of life or close to end of life. So you kind of got this great advantage, which I love, of not having to carry the sort of burden of responsibility for using virgin resource. So I'm using virgin resource in the wood we use, and for me, the sort of designing with purpose does mean respecting that responsibility that we carry for using resource and making sure that what we create out of it fulfills not just function, but also fulfills a whole host of what I would call absolute requirements nowadays of longevity of use, sustainability in manufacture, and increasingly, we come to look again and again at the sort of circularity and trying to keep things in use for the longest possible time. When they finally finish, they end up back with Jay.
That's right. I haven't got one of your pieces yet, Sean. I haven't had one of those yet.
Okay. I'll go and find something down in our buyback scheme, and we'll send it up to you.
I was going to say they're too loved and cherished. They're never going to make it to Jay, are they?
Exactly. Never.
Katie, how about you?
I mean, I think it's a term that can be interpreted in lots of different ways, and Sean and Jay have both just given 2 different examples of what that phrase can mean. From my point of view, with an interest in the circular economy, 80% of the environmental impact of anything is baked in at design stage. So I think designing with purpose is about considering that at the moment at which you're designing something. Does it need to exist at all? I think is the first question that needs to be asked. And then it's about looking at the principles of the circular economy. So designing out waste, how can this product be made in a way that's not wasteful? And keeping materials and products in use for as long as possible. So designing it in a way that it can be repaired, that it's easy to read and see and understand so that people can fix it. And also thinking about end of life. So often I speak to designers who tell me that their product is sustainable because it's designed to last for generations. And my answer is always, and then what? You know, what happens after those generations? Can it go back into the earth? And the final principle of the circular economy is regenerating natural systems. So making sure that you're not treating materials in a way that renders them damaging to the environment. So there's a sort of heat, beat, treat model, and sort of combining materials and doing those sorts of things that means they can't be disassembled to be recycled, reused, or put back into the economy, into the environment, sorry. So I think these are all things we need to be thinking about at design stage to kind of affect that 80% of the environmental impact. And for me, from a circular economy perspective, that's what design with purpose means. But I think it can also mean all sorts of other things, you know, looking at things like inclusive design, design for disability. I think there's lots of ways that phrase could be interpreted.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that was probably my thought with coming up with the title, is given the challenges we've had this year, everyone's doing quite a lot of reevaluation, aren't they, of entirely what our own purpose is. And how you can use the skills or the opportunities or the platforms that you have to create some dialogue, as we are here, but actually start to get some positive action as well. I'd love to hear from Sean about how you're using the principle in your own work. Obviously in the profile I said about sustainable timber sourcing, but I'm well aware that there's the well-being range from Benchmark as well. There's just so much activity coming on from your studio.
Yeah, the sustainability element has been with me since the start, you know, since nearly 40 years ago, when people really just thought it was some sort of old hippie stuff that was, but, you know, I believed it then, and happily, you know, the world has pretty much all believes it now. There are natural extensions to the pure sustainability thing. So certainly Katie's field of considerable interest in circularity is something that interests us a lot. And as Katie quite rightly says, it's not just about making something to last 100 years, but, you know, what happens to it beyond that. And so making stuff out of natural materials that were at the very end of life, where you are talking about returning it back to the earth, that you can do that. So one of the things that we've developed over the last couple of years is a different way of upholstering. So we no longer use plastic foam at all. We only use coir, latex, and wool, and that, you know, all of which are A, sustainably sourced, and B, natural materials, and they don't require any fire retardant. So there's the sort of health and well-being aspect of avoiding the use of very, very toxic fire retardant chemicals, and at the same time producing something that it may have a slightly different feel to plastic foam. I think it's a better feel. And I'm really pleased. You know, we don't stand alone in this. There's down your way, Katie, there's the Natural Mat, which are, you know, really doing a fantastic job and have helped us greatly along our journey in natural upholstery. There's Sheridan Coakley with Coakley and Cox, you know, they're developing it. Maker and Son sofas. You know, they're all working on this transition from the dreaded plastic foam, which has no end of life story except for mountains of landfill. And so that's something that, yeah, I'm really committed to and excited by.
And I mean, the fact that you were so far ahead in the thought process and everyone else is catching up really quickly, it's wonderful to have somebody out there demonstrating how beautifully it can be achieved as well. Jay, did you want to add anything and sort of using the principles of design in with purpose in your work, whether it's to do with social enterprise or
I think for me, it's using natural products in the sense that I use everything I use is water-based. I do my best, but Sean, the governor, as I call him, has just mentioned natural upholstery. So now I've got to get onto that one. I've got to get onto natural upholstery, which I haven't been doing. And I think I got a call from someone to say to me that there's going to be a shortage of plastic phones across the UK, and basically we're going to have to find another alternative. So designing with purpose means that once the environment says that, look, we can't produce this particular product anymore, then you're going to have to find something which is an alternative. And if we go back to the natural ways of what upholstery used to be, the natural way is the only way. So the guys in the old school were doing it the right way in the first time. It's just that us, the new school, we kind of
all we're doing now is going back to what was done before. You know, we were using natural fiber, which is all that anyone ever used before. Yeah,
that's all they use. So it's like, to me, that's I've kind of been caught with my jacket off, I should say, because basically Sean's taught me something that I never knew about. Natural upholstery, I'm going to get onto it. It has to be done.
Brilliant. I mean, there's a lot of challenges, isn't there, moving forward and making these shifts, but a lot of not necessarily the word opportunity, but chances to really significantly shift. And I think I'd be interested to know what sort of innovations in making or remaking you've seen in the wider industry that maybe feel inspiring, or a good direction to be keeping an eye on. Katie, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I've just written a book about things made from waste, and I think that's a fantastic innovation that's happening in the industry at the moment. I feature 30 designers, makers or manufacturers in the book, all of whom are using things that would ordinarily have ended up in landfill as their primary raw material. And it's interesting that many of the makers I interviewed said, I don't think we should call it waste anymore. It's not waste, it's a resource as with any other. And several of them sort of said, well, this is just normal to our generation. Why would you use virgin materials? And when you look at some of the stats, so lead, gold and antimony, all of which are present in every one of the 1.56 million smartphones that we made this year, are all set to run out in the next 10 years. There's more copper in the incineration that's left over after we burn rubbish than there is in traditionally mined copper ore. So I think increasingly the things we need are in landfill rather than in the ground. And I think what we need is more innovation around finding, tracking and identifying that waste, and also tagging it in the design process. So as Sean said, what happens at the end of life? And if something's not as obviously wood as a wooden table, you know, if something has got mixed materials, or, you know, half the problem with plastic is it's so difficult to identify what type of plastic it is at the end of its life. And you can now get RFID tagging systems in a single thread of fiber. So it's kind of super easy to label and tag and put this sort of information into products at design stage, so that when it comes to disassembly stage, people will understand what those materials are and be able to reuse them and keep them in that loop of use much better. So I think that's where that's where some of the real innovation is happening at the moment.
And I guess, Jay, as you were saying, with some of we're both ambassadors of Quest, aren't we? And seeing the importance of maintaining the skills and bringing in new crafts people that can learn these new techniques, but also, and will be very adept at doing so, but they also have traditional skills as well. Harking back to, you know, my grandparents who never threw anything away. It was all saved in the you know, to the nth degree.
I think with the craftspeople, they as you stated, I think they had the way forward. And as Sean stated, we're just going back to the old school way of doing things. Reference to Quest, those are people kind of at the top of their game. The young people I tend to deal with, it's introducing to them that this piece of rubbish, you can turn it and make it into something desirable. Because one of the things that a lot of people, when they mention either upcycling or recycling, they always think it's second best. But the reality is, I think it's first best. If you are able to create something that once was rubbish, you can then get someone re-looking at their own waste in their home. You can get them rethinking about what they're actually doing with their waste. So for me, the traditional skills are very, very important, but the modern skills are just as important as us going forward, because if we don't really look at what we're generating and how we're populating this earth with the amount of waste that we're creating, if we don't rethink waste, and it's lovely to hear Katie say that the designers that she's spoken to are not calling it waste. They just wanted to come up with something completely different, because the first starting point that I have when I speak to young people who have no idea about design is I explain to them that something that's left on the waste side, that someone's just thrown out, they don't want it anymore, we're going to turn that into a desirable item. And they're shocked out. They're like, well, hold on a minute, how can you do that? And then with a few skills, either showing them upholstery or paint or applying certain design techniques to make that look desirable, it then becomes, it's not waste anymore. That's something that someone wants to have in their home. And I remember when I first started, I had the fortunate position to come and sit down with Sean in his workshop and just listen and learn from people like him to say, okay, this is how you create a desirable item. And everything that Sean and Benchmark do is desirable. And I think those qualities that he showed me has then transpired, and I've just done it in the furniture that I've got now. And that's basically it. It is about getting people to reevaluate waste and not just see it as, oh, I can get rid of that, buy something new, and that's it. And it's like, whoa, slow down a minute. Why don't we just redo that? Why don't we put some new fabric on there? Why don't we just add a bit of paint or do something to it? And it can just bring a new lease of life to it.
Absolutely.
And it does bring a very, you bring a very new lease of life, and it's fantastic.
Thank you, yeah, thank you.
I'm interested in something that Katie, you just said about recovery, material recovery from waste, from landfill. I remember my brother used to work at the Colorado School of Mines, and probably 20 years ago, he said to me, Sean, the landfill of today is the mines of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And they were already 20 years ago, they were looking at ways of mining down into landfill to recover resources that were going to become, far more valuable in the future. And that technology, continues to develop. But I mean, for sure, they are the mines of tomorrow. They really are.
Definitely.
It's just to be quite nice to get to it before it all got buried in a mixed up jumble. But I mean, big advances in that way. The whole sorting of waste is so much more advanced than it was, and we're presumably got a long way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been seeing some incredible things happening over in Mexico, which Katie's, I'm sure, you're aware of as well. But the sort of recycling of glass to a level that can be used for decorative glass, and you hear in this country all the time that you can't do that for delicate art objects, but they're doing it in Mexico, improving it, and they're using renewable energy, actually sort of cooking oils from the local restaurants, for example, which is incredible. And the amount of textiles that I'm seeing shipped over to India is really quite horrifying. And I sort of wish that we had some of those facilities onshore here, so we didn't have to ship them all away and then bring them all back again to start doing something. So I think it's joining up the dots, isn't it, across the whole process.
I guess what's driving that, though, it's the sorting at the moment. It's a very manual job. It's kind of there is no mechanization that's effectively doing that, and I suppose that's why waste gets shipped off to faraway shores where labor's cheaper. And I mean, it's a pity. The answer must lie in innovative ways of sorting it before it ends up in a muddle.
Yes, and it's
having things that simply dismantle, so you can unclip the plastic part from the metal part and put them in separate bins. That would, that sort of thing, rather than just chucking it in whichever recycling bin seems the closest.
Yeah.
And I mean, are there any other initiatives that you've seen? That I'm really passionate about what's going on in the textile sector at the moment, because it feels like in the fashion industry there's lots of wringing of hands, but actually textiles is huge in the interiors industry as well. There's a global organic trading standards, which I think is really significant in terms of getting people to look at organic fibre and regeneratively planted crops. And then Ian Mankin was doing some fantastic work with zero waste, using every last bit of thread that would be, leftover stock, or coming up with basically tasking their young design team to come up with new designs that would be really short run, but it meant nothing would go to waste. So it's really exciting to see that.
One of the projects in the book is 2 collections of rugs from Castal, which is a Swedish rug company. And they did the same. They tasked one of their young upcoming designers to find a solution for all the end of spool yarn. And she came up with 2 beautiful collections that the colour kind of changes as you go through the rug, because they're pulling one leftover spool of yarn and then the next leftover spool of yarn. And they're these really beautiful, dynamic, interesting rugs that, you know, you perhaps wouldn't have come up with had that not been the brief. And so I think sometimes, you know, there used to be this sense that if we were going to make an ecological choice, we had to compromise on aesthetics, whereas I think that's changing now. I think there are really beautiful products out there that you'd buy just because they're beautiful or just because they're environmental, and actually you get to have the best of both worlds now.
Totally agree with you.
And Katie, you probably it's Meta from Denmark that's produced the ocean range of recovered plastic. You familiar with their chairs? I think it's called the Ocean Range. It's made entirely from. Okay, it's recovered ocean plastic that is then recycled. It's by Nana Ditzel, I think. It is, and I think that's a really, you know, we're all acutely conscious of the ocean plastic problem, and obviously, you know, the farming, the collection of it is tricky, but it's partly refocusing people's attention. If you can make something beautiful out of what is otherwise highly toxic, noxious stuff floating around in our seas, if nothing else, it makes them think about it, even if the amount of recovery is not that significant, but it may be, I don't know. But I was really impressed by Meta with that initiative of recycled ocean plastic.
Chimera have produced an upholstery fabric made from ocean plastic as well, and you know, it sits alongside any of their upholstery fabrics. You wouldn't be able to tell which ones are made from ocean plastic and which ones aren't. So I think there's a lot of initiatives like that coming, which is great. We just need more of them.
I think even the initiatives, I think we've done one with yourself, Sean, and Sebastian Cox, where some of your offcuts, you gave us those, and then we made some stools out of them. Sebastian Cox actually, well, he fells like greenwood furniture. That's correct, isn't it? It's greenwood.
Yeah, coppice timber, young timber.
Yeah, young timber. And basically, I think manufacturers, even fabric houses as well, that's another thing. Fabric houses like Chimera, Jab, they actually give me, so in their showrooms, they will have all these drapes and these samples of fabric, and normally they just get thrown away at the end of their life. And then they just send them to me, and I use those within the designs that I do. So my designs are kind of like one-off because I don't have much fabric, but I'm using the fabric that they would throw away. So the initiatives in this country, I think, need to come a lot faster forward, because there are other countries that are doing things like above and beyond what we're doing. But I think if manufacturers, they're using something, they might have a product that's going to go to waste, give it to someone that can turn it into something beautiful. I think that's the way we should be doing now. A lot more should be done in that way, and that just helps that kind of circular economy of like, okay, we've created some waste, we're all going to create waste, but what can I do with this? Who would take this? And there's a number of charities, there's a number of new designers that are wanting this resources to just get their hands on and just work with.
I think that the regulators could do a lot more in terms of just making end of life, or firstly, I think lifetime repair, which is something that we offer, you know, and have done for quite a while. You know, lifetime repair. I think that's really important. All manufacturers, in my opinion, should offer lifetime repair. I was brought to my attention by Yvonne Chenard's Patagonia clothing brand, you know, which, you know, I could send a 20-year-old pair of shorts back and they'll put a new zip in it for me. And so I think lifetime repair should become a sort of regulatory obligation on manufacturers. And then end of life, the ability to be able to return stuff for appropriate repurposing, redirection, resale, or recycling, because the manufacturers know how to do it best. So I think everything, absolutely everything, it should be a rule that everything can go back. I can just put it in the post and send it back to the manufacturer, and make it their job to deal with it properly. And so regulators could make a really big difference. And it's all very well good-hearted people like Jay and Katie and me and a host of others around the world doing it, but actually it'll be regulatory things, well, either financial incentive or regulatory incentive that will actually turn the tide on us.
I think that's so true, and it's that how you get the collaborative voices pushing for that is really critical as well, isn't it? Because we know quite a lot of action doesn't come if we just sit and wait and hope it'll appear. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, with collaborative ventures reaping the quickest and biggest dividends, are there any sort of industry-wide innovations or systems that you'd like to see develop?
I think what Sean was just saying there, I think the relegation, people actually having to do something and give things back, or just people talking and coming together. Because I think once you come as creators, when you come together, you start coming up with ideas of what you can do. So I think there's a lot more things that could be explored, and maybe this might be the start of a discussion where, what do we do with all our waste? Anybody who's listening to this, or everybody that is taking part in it, can actually say, well, okay, I have this amount of waste. What can I do with it? Is there a body that I can say, well, this is what I have. Who would you send this to in that kind of that network? And I luckily I'm linked to a couple of fabric houses, so they're able to just send me the stuff. Not a problem. So we have that kind of relationship, and then I'm able to then distribute it amongst the charities that I know. So it doesn't just sit with me, because I have quite a lot of fabric sent to me, and basically I farm it out to people that are using it for like workshops where they're teaching sometimes blind people, disabled people, and just trying to start their own business and make sure that their charities have a revenue coming in, and then to have a free resource. So I think initiatives, there could be more. I think there needs to be more done, and it's just us coming together and see what we can do.
I've recently completed my carbon literacy training, and I was having a conversation with some of the guys on this training course, and we were saying, given any object, you could estimate a price. You know, if I said, you know, here we've got a handmade dining chair made from FSC certified wood, most people could have a guess about how much that would cost.
Yeah.
If you ask someone what the carbon footprint of that was, most people wouldn't have the foggiest, they wouldn't know where to start. And so we were talking about perhaps like the traffic light system for food in terms of how healthy it is, whether that we could create some sort of labeling system that sort of had a red, amber, green labeling for carbon footprints, just to give, you know, the ordinary lay consumer a rough idea of this sort of thing was really carbon intensive to produce, this sort of thing less so, and taking into account things like how far the raw materials have had to travel, or how far that product's had to travel to get to you. Because I think a lot of the problem around this stuff is education, and I think at the moment manufacturers are able to externalize some of the costs of production, and I think sort of pollution and carbon production is one of those areas they're able to externalize. So I'd love to see some sort of packaging system that made that stuff all a lot clearer, so people knew what they were buying.
The trouble that we face with that, and we do exactly that, Katie. We do life cycle assessments and full EPDs, environmental product declarations, on much of our product range. But I mean, a full EPD is a very, very, very intensive thing to produce. It's very expensive for manufacturers to do it. But also, we do it because we've got a good story to tell. You know, we always come out pretty well because, you know, we're using a renewable resource. We use 100% renewable energy, etc. You know, we always have a happy outcome. The problem is with a labeling system that the people who will have an unhappy outcome, let's say the concrete industry or the, you know, there are industries that frankly would struggle to present well and not have the big red sticker. They're never going to welcome that.
No, of course not.
and so there'll be so much fudging of the data. I mean, I completely agree. I think that, you know, everything should carry not a price in pound and a price in carbon. I mean, it should be that's
you know, we've
something
managed
people
to do
can
this stuff
say.
for food, right? I'm sure all the confectionery companies and soft drinks companies kicked up a fuss, but and you know, this stuff's not accurate. There's 100 different ways to calculate a carbon footprint, but we've got there with food. So, you know, I'm perhaps being naive, optimistic, but I would like to imagine we could get there with carbon.
No, and so would I. And you know, I've worked on it for eight years since we did our first life cycle assessments. But it's partly the science is very imperfect and it keeps shifting. But it is a goal that's absolutely worth pursuing, that everyone should be aware of the carbon cost of what they buy. And you know, a lot of architectural projects, we now are offering our clients to say, we can tell you exactly what the carbon cost of this is. Because we have the mechanism within our production to calculate that. But it's I completely agree, and I think we will get there, Katie. I think we will get there. It's just going to be another, you know, I don't know, number of years.
Yeah, and sadly we don't have many of those left.
No,
we don't.
No. I mean, and there has to. I do think that, you know, we've got COP26 coming up, hopefully next year, in Glasgow, and I think that I don't believe everything our government has to say, but I do believe that they are putting quite a lot of credible weight behind COP26. The climate conference in Glasgow, and I think that does give us a bit of a platform in this country to kind of push people into some performance fairly quickly. You know, the sort of race to zero initiative is a very worthwhile one, I think.
That's what I was going to say. Actually, there is a huge benefit, isn't there, for people that are proactive and lead in this. It's not, they can only benefit and come out looking bigger and further ahead of everybody else.
It's hard work though.
Is it? Of course.
It's hard work, and it's expensive. It's really expensive. You know, none of it comes for free. And so, you know, fortune may favor the brave, but it comes at a cost.
Well, I will hopefully, if there are more people who can collaborate and share some of the knowledge, because I think that's also a challenge, isn't it? The amount of time you can waste trying to find out who to go and who can help you with these things. I mean, it was that I'm conscious we haven't got an awful lot of time left. Is there any sort of names or brands that you admire and you think are on a journey towards a positive legacy?
I think you've got two of them right there. You've got Katie, you've got Sean. Like those are the names, as far as I'm concerned, that leave a legacy. And these are people that I've admired from the get-go and have supported me when I first got into this design. You've got two legacies there.
Jay, I've got your name written down on my list.
I got Jay's written down too.
Look at you too. No, I got in there first. See, I got in there first.
But in all seriousness, one of the things I explore in the book is the obsession with newness in the 21st century, and how the moment we take something out of its packaging, it starts to decline and become less and less valuable. And so many people have said to me, how can we change the culture? How can we change this? And Jay, I think that's one of the things you're doing with the repair shop, is you're demonstrating the value of age, the value of stories, you know, how items can get better with the patina of age, rather than us seeing those little bumps and scrapes as a negative thing. And I think that's really important. I think that's not to be underestimated.
No, I totally agree with you. I think the repair shop, what it's done for people looking at items that they might have in their garage or things that they was going to throw away, it's getting people to re-look at them. And I think for me, with designing or redesigning these classics, so when I looked back at a guy that I admire, Ernest Race, who was probably one of the original upcyclers in the sense of, after the Second World War, he melted down ammunition and airplanes that were decommissioned and designed some beautiful furniture that, to me, is still classic designs. If we can look at what was going on before, whether that is with the natural upholstery or it is just looking at how because we are destroying this planet at an alarming rate. It's unbelievable what we're doing. But if we turn things around by looking at what we already have and how we can redesign it, I think we'll be all right. They will be all right, I should say, because we won't reap the benefits. We'll be people who are not here now. We need to do this for people who are not here, basically. But the future is in these two hands. They are people that I always watch and admire, 110%, always.
Making us blush, Jay. I think that I've been really impressed by rather in the way of earnest race and melting down post-war scrap. I think Emeco, the American company that started off their chairs out of recycled aluminium, and now I see their new chairs, their new chair designed by Barbara Osgoby is made from 100% recycled plastic and recyclable plastic. And so in theory, it's a chair that could just go on and on and on being remade. But I do think, Katie, you make a very, very good point, and you're right to flag up Jay in this, that the obsession with newness is a problem for us. I'm quite intrigued that IKEA, I see, have just launched a new sort of buyback or credit back on. To me, it's amazing. I'm not sure that I've ever managed to take apart it. I've put together bits of IKEA furniture. I'm not sure I've ever managed to take apart a piece and have anything worthwhile. But I do admire the fact that they have just launched some credit scheme for returning stuff, and I think they're going to have a part of their store which is for repurposed or second-hand, whatever you call it, reused objects, and that's got to be a good initiative. I mean, you wouldn't normally think that you'd sort of praise IKEA for circularity, but maybe they're, it's all about all of us making a journey, isn't it? Wherever we are on that journey, we all got to start with that first step.
Did you want to say something, Katie? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, just the other person I was going to mention is the fashion brand Ray-Ban. I think they're doing some really interesting stuff. They launched a collection called Ray-Made, in which all the clothes are made from pre-existing materials. So a lot of it is kind of army surplus stock. So there's a beautiful t-shirt made from a 1950s silk parachute map. But they've also recently, even more controversially, launched a collection called Ray Found. And these are army surplus or forces surplus clothes that have never been worn. And Ray-Ban have curated them, popped a Ray-Ban logo on, and are reselling them. So they haven't altered them in any way. What they're saying is, we don't want to make new stuff. There's kind of thousands and thousands of these items of clothing lying around in warehouses. And they got a bit of criticism for it because people were sort of saying, well, can't I just get this from an army surplus store? And what I loved about Ray-Ban's response was, yeah, do it. We're not trying to sell you clothes here. We're trying to change the world. Please go and buy stuff from army surplus stores. And so I think they're doing some really innovative stuff around this idea, in an industry that is deeply polluting. 47% of the raw materials that the fashion industry takes out of the earth don't even make it to the clothes on the high street. So fashion's got a lot of work to do, and I think Ray-Ban really are a leading light in that industry.
Well, that's a brand I didn't know, so thank you very much. I'm definitely going to research that one. I think we've probably just about run out of time, so I didn't know if there was any sort of resources that you wanted to quickly recommend. I was going to sort of mention Global Organic Textile Standard again, because I think that's really important. Maybe the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, talking about circular economy, really useful.
And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation actually run a free course which you can take. I think it takes about 7 or 8 weeks. It's all online, and I think it's really worth anybody who's interested in this area signing up for. The other ones I was going to mention were Carbon Literacy. I've mentioned again, they run a 4-week course. I think it cost about £70, really worth doing to understand more about carbon footprints. 1% for the Planet, which is the charity that was set up by the founder of Patagonia. And that's just a really simple thing of asking businesses to donate 1% of their turnover every year to environmental charities. It's just a brilliant way. It's almost a voluntary tax to get more money into the good work that they're doing. And also B Corp, which is a sort of organizational standard. It's very difficult to get B Corp certification. It's something I'm working towards slowly, but that's one that sort of looks at people and planet. And again, I think that's I think some of these external certifications are really important in an area where there's a lot of greenwashing. So I just wanted to mention those ones.
Thank you, they're all brilliant. But unless you have anything else, any burning thing that we need to sneak in at the end, I was just going to say thank you so much for joining me. I would actually love to talk for another couple of hours with you. Or you're obviously people that I hugely admire, which is why I hoped that you would be able to do this today. Thank you very, very much for your time. And can we just, hopefully, we've got lots of people tuning in to thank our audience. And I hope it's been a thoughtful and thought-provoking and useful discussion. And if you did want to get in touch, I'm sure Decorex could redirect you. Any kind of collaborative industry opportunity, I think it's really, now is the time to do it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you very much for having us, Kerryn.
Thanks, Kerryn.
Thank you, Kerryn.
Bye.